be joined shortly by panelists here to discuss designing for the circular economy, research and industry practices. How can the current maker students be inspired and supported in their quest for sustainable, functional, and low-waste materials? What resources are available for students to ideate with circular economy practices? How can we reimagine the way product design is taught at schools to move away from our traditional take, make, dispose economy to one with a closed loop, where materials and data are continuously repurposed? Leading the discussion is Kate Harmon from Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship at University of Oregon. She has been building educational programming and entrepreneurial spaces within academia for more than 10 years. Kate brings a wealth of experience gained by working with multiple institutions and an ever-evolving student demographic. She is helping to develop the next generation of innovators while putting a focus on inclusivity.
Hi, my name is Kate Harmon, and I'm the Director of Cross-Campus Engagement for the Lundquist Center for Entrepreneurship at the University of Oregon. And I'm really excited to have with us our two guest speakers for today. Kiersten Muenchinger is the Associate Professor in the Product Design Department at the University of Oregon. She is the former founding chair of the Product Design Department here at Oregon. And Leo Ochoa is the Chief Innovation Officer and founder of Dorsum, which is a performance posture support device that helps reduce injury and alleviate pain. So thank you both for joining us today on this great topic. Let's start off by having you both speak a little bit about your own journey towards sustainability in your professional career. I think our audience would really be interested to learn how sustainability became a big focus of your career path. So Kiersten, you want to start on that one?
Sure. I think that my journey, or at least a fun point on my journey that I'll call the starting point, was in college. When I went to college to undergrad, I thought that I wanted to be an environmental engineer. And in my first environmental engineering course in college, I was told that environmental engineers fix all of the problems that everyone else is doing. It's all smokestack scrubbing and water eutrophication cleansing. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to make cool products that saved the world. So I immediately discarded environmental engineering and went into mechanical engineering because I wanted to make cool products that would save the world, but I still wanted to save the world. And so the sustainability aspect of how you create something that is going to be more sustainable, more useful for people, was the thing that propelled me, or still propels me, in looking at sustainable design.
Excellent, excellent. Leo, what about you? What's your path towards sustainability?
My path towards sustainability, it all starts when you're in school, so college, when you're studying design. And you come at it from the perspective that you want to change the world or make it a better place, or just design a better world in general. What ends up happening is you get lost in that process when you start, working for a company, or you take on some of your first jobs, where depending on the size of the company, you realize that it's an ambition, an aspiration a lot of companies have, but in their implementation to the products, they're not really applying it. So going into designing for healthcare and electronics, I got to see the negative effects of that, how you're creating waste and you're bringing it into the world without much consideration on how to collect that back or how to reduce the waste you make. So you start to lose some of that passion when you enter the real world. And I decided the best way I can do that was to venture off into entrepreneurship, where I can design the products I'm passionate about towards solving the problem I'm passionate about, but also consider more sustainable resources, a more eco-friendly design process. And even if it wasn't at the large scale that would have a huge impact to the world, at least I got to implement it in the small work or the small products that I'm creating now. So for me, the process was kind of learning in school, learning how different it is when you enter the work field and in the real world, and the challenges that come from it, and understanding those challenges, and then deciding what's the impact that you can have to either your community or to your customers, and where you're going to find passion and satisfaction as a designer. And for me, it was going into entrepreneurship. So that's how I'm approaching it. And as a startup, it's hard because you don't have the budgets, but you start small and you can maintain that aspiration or that dream. So little by little, it's kind of aligning yourself towards that direction.
So start off with our first question. How can design education help students inspire them to use sustainable resources in creating products and services? And maybe Kiersten, if you want to take that one first.
Sure. One of the things that we do in design education that I think is helpful is just displaying what can be done. One of the examples that we do that is based on the question that you asked is using more sustainable materials in the prototyping that we do. So for example, when we're using polymers, our polymer lab is predominantly using polylactic acid, which is a biopolymer, and it's also recyclable in-house, and we recycle it in-house using our own methods to chop up prototypes and re-extrude filament and put it back into our 3D prototyping machines. So the students get a on-the-ground version of what something is in a more industrial system, and they can see that. Similarly, using things in Oregon, we have a lot of wood in Oregon. And so using the kinds of wood that we have that are prevalent and are in forms like plywoods that you see everywhere, but that we make and that we're really good at making and distributing and having them have a facility using that, that's helpful for them to know what is out in the world and what is specific to our location, that if they are manufacturing something in our location, they can use this abundant pool that we have here.
That's great. Leo, maybe you also take that question. Again, how can design education help students create products using sustainable resources?
Yes, I think taking design education to inspire students is really looking at and redefining what the design thinking process is to be a lot more inclusive. So kind of looking beyond the user you design for and looking at system-based design. So thinking more as a whole, and also looking and evaluating at the products we create have an effect on ourselves. They have an effect on systems. They have an effect on the planet. So to inspire students to use innovative ways around design is really looking at or moving towards a user-centric approach to a more holistic planet-based approach or systems-based approach. In the past, it was very short. It was just focus on creating something and then delivering it to the world or to the user. Now it's looking beyond that. It's looking at what effects does the product we design and create, what effects does it have on the planet, and what is left behind? When before it was rarely considered. It was kind of talked about, but it wasn't really implementing it. So now I think design for education or student-based learning is really looking beyond launching just a product. It's looking at how it lives in the real world.
That's great. Next question, what are some of the fresh kind of approaches or ways that you are teaching the circular economy to this new generation who is interested in exploring the examination of material ecosystem or eco-cycle? Kiersten,
Well, sure. One of the things that we do is take students to see what is happening in recycling facilities, for example. What happens when you're reclaiming materials? And I think because we live in such a technologically advanced society, the fact that there are human beings sorting waste is made much more clear that this is why we need to sort things into different piles. This is why if you have curbside recycling, You can hire more people if you commingle, but it's easier to sort if you inform everyone what kinds of materials you can take, your recycling center takes, and those are more easily put into the correct places to be considered new materials, new raw materials for something else. So seeing that, knowing that it's a human endeavor, it's not some space-aged robot picking out the paper from the plastics, I think is one of the things that really drives home, even though we have so many technological advances, these very human-centric pieces are part of the puzzle that we need to consider.
And maybe I'm gonna riff on what you were just saying. I'm curious, given you have like been teaching through this lens of sustainability for many, many years, have you seen anything recently change in terms of maybe a focus that was previously on recycled materials to now really thinking through all of the sort of upstream impacts and really thinking through this whole circular economy approach in design education?
Yeah, I think the dew is off the lily on recycling plastics, for example, that it's much more understood now that recycling plastics isn't the way to handle that particular kind of waste, especially when the plastics that we see that we are most comfortable with are all used as packaging, and there's not a lot of stuff in that stuff. There's not a lot of plastic actually in a recycled plastic beverage bottle. But if you're recycling something that's much larger, like a car, like lumber from a decommissioned building, you get a lot more stuff out of that recycling system. So looking at what your other kinds of inputs are, how to lightweight something, for example, that's one of the best tactics you can use for overall sustainability, no matter what the materiality is. That's a much more doable. It's something that you as a designer have control over. It's something that you as a business have control over, that you can see and you can justify, again, in any kind of material, but it comes true, it is helpful in carbon sequestration, in transportation costs. Those two things go together, and that's immediately understandable to folks as opposed to recycling.
Good point. Great. Leo, the same question to you. So again, when you're thinking about approaching teaching the circular economy to students, how do you go about approaching the examination of material eco-cycle to them?
I think it's similar to what Kiersten mentioned, is just taking them to the source. It's like taking them to recycling centers, fabric mills where fabrics get repurposed, but also helping the students slow down in the design process. A lot of them, because we live in this advanced world with digital technology, there's a tendency to rush towards researching the solution or looking at what has been done before, or just going off and buying something that can quickly be made. Well, you're in that process, you're buying products that you're turning into waste yourself. So it's really helping the students by giving them more hands-on projects or hands-on projects where you're telling them, before you jump into the digital stuff, slow down and create with your hands, but giving them really specific design constraint projects where if you take them to a recycling center, you tell them you can design this product, but it can only be with materials that are donated to you, or materials that you bargain with, but materials that you can only buy at these locations. And it has to be a product, almost the complete opposite, something that wouldn't be found there. But you're really challenging them not to jump into buying something and to make something themselves. By putting tighter design constraints, you're forcing their creativity to narrow down on solving that specific problem. And by doing that, you're walking them through the process of what circular design is trying to teach them. Because it's really just looking at products that haven't been made, looking at them from a different angle to find a new meaning or a new value. So I always try to have them slow down and create with their hands first.
That's great. Yeah.
May I add something to that, Kate, real quick?
Yeah.
So I'll give another example. One of the one of the projects that we've done in the past and comes up often is designing a stool made of 1 2x4. So you're building a product that's meant to last, that has functionality that has been used around the world. You can find stools in every culture, everywhere in the world, made of all kinds of different materials. By setting the constraint, as Leo was saying, that you have 1 2x4 and trying to fully utilize the way that that particular material comes to us, you're not trying to change the manufacturing system, you're not trying to change the distribution system, but you know that you can maximize the use of that material as it comes to you, make something durable that will last as well. That also helps set home. It gives a constraint, it gives very specific constraints. How much of this can you use? How much can you change it? How different can a whole studio of stools look like with that constraint? Also helps people understand that there's a lot that you can do in thinking sustainably with specific materials, with very tight criterion, and still have a diverse set of outcomes.
That's a great point. I'm curious if for both of you, can you share some examples of students' projects where they're developing redesigning a product for a marketplace or coming up with a new invention? Can you share a little bit, maybe a couple examples of kind of what Kiersten just highlighted there, how they have gone about approaching using sustainable resources, and what sort of outcomes have you seen in sort of those projects?
Yeah, I have one idea. I don't know. You tell me if it's a good example, but I'll just share what comes to mind. A lot of it. So I'm a big fan of furniture design, and it's something everyone can connect to because we're always sitting in chairs or on living room furniture. We're always resting after we work. So I always like to start with projects that involve hands-on design approaches to furniture design. And going back to the previous question, one example is you can take the students to a recycling center and then show them how to repurpose a product, but how to add value to an existing product to create a new product where you're looking for a new business opportunity. And then in turn, you're adding that business value to a for-profit organization. And one example that comes to mind is it's a lot around flat pack furniture design, where there's because with that, you're reducing waste in manufacturing, you're reducing waste in shipping material, and you're making it easy for the user to assemble and then disassemble if it breaks down or they have to send a part back to remanufacture or refurbish in a way. So one good exercise is to take them to a recycling center and then look at old furniture that has been abandoned because there's a tear on the cushion or the fabric. And you can start working backwards, but also forwards on the design thinking. A lot of the times the structure is in really good quality. It might just need a new finish or a new coat of paint. And what you do is you strip off all the material that has gone to waste, that has been used, or the cushion has been worn down. You show them how to disassemble a product, and the part that wore down, you can recycle, but the structure, you can repurpose that for a new product. And you're teaching them how to disassemble or design in a way that's modular. But what you do is that you take what has more value, like the structure of a chair, and then you can take them to a fabric mill. A lot of the times, mid-sized companies or large companies, they do bulk orders on fabrics, and they only use a small percentage of it, and the rest gets recycled, or they get sent to these fabric mills because now the color or the print is out of fashion. It's still really good quality, but you're teaching them the negative effects of fast fashion or how designing towards just a fashionable product creates waste. So you're taking something that's really beautiful, and then you can repurpose and redesign the cushioning for a chair. So that's one example. Another example is you can work backwards. You can take a chair that's been recycled and you can give them the design constraints or the design challenge to look at that same chair and redesign it by removing the waste that was created in manufacturing. So you tell them, redesign this chair without adhesives, with no glue, no screws, no nails. And it forces them to then take away material. And a lot of that material is it's the waste that gets added in manufacturing. So a lot of the times they come up with really creative locking joint systems where the new design can be easily disassembled and flat. And then you give them the task to design the packaging for it. What you'll end up seeing is they'll create a new packaging that can be applied to other products. So by taking them through those exercises, you're teaching them to work forwards and then also backwards, and then creating or looking for the business opportunity. And what bigger companies or for-profit companies are really looking for is that business opportunity. And then secondly is they look for the design. If you start first with the design, most likely they're not going to really give you the time unless they see the business value in it.
So maybe a question like, how do you highlight to students the the economic benefits of creating a venture around sustainable material or sustainable resources or something like that? Would that be sort of broad enough for both of you to answer?
I think looking at examples of new ideas in how businesses can profit is helpful. If you're looking at your whole supply chain. Another textile example is with offcuts, for example. If you have ordered all of your fabric and you've done your whole run, but you've ordered extra because you are smart and you do that. There are all these offcuts that you can get, and those can be used for other kinds of projects, whether by the original company or not. And one of the business changes that's happened lately is capsule collections. You can work with offcuts that have been created specifically that are still new, but they might be going to waste because they're not used for the original project, but use them in some other capsule collection kind of way, which is it's hip, it's new, there's only a certain number of whatever the product is that you're making. So it's extra interesting to get when it comes out. And that's a way of looking at sustainability through using waste material, using a resource that might not be around for a long time, using a business model that is going to allow those resources to be looked at as beneficial and interesting because there's only one of them, as opposed to something that, but I can't get that any longer, so it's not good. That's a whole new business system that's happened lately that has a sustainable undercurrent to it that might not be obvious at the outset, but if you think about it as a whole, if you think about it in a more circular way, it's a much more sustainable model.
That's great. I hope you got that. That was perfect on camera. So take that one and record it, and let me think of a good question so that will flow right from what. So maybe the question is, what sort of economic business opportunities can students see through the lens of circular economy design?
Absolutely. And can I add to Kiersten's example there?
Mm-hmm.
Another great benefit is, and this is kind of more where you start looking at the process in a circular way. She described the benefits to the business by creating, collections or capsules where you're utilizing the same fabric or the same colors and ordering them in smaller quantities. It also has a very positive effect on the manufacturing side, because when you start working with vendors and factories to make your products, a lot of the times they have to purchase their material in large quantities. So there's a minimum order of quantities to take on your project. If you can streamline the material you use, those textiles or the fabrics, you're helping the factory meet those minimum quantities that they need for your material and not create waste, or you're not storing larger amounts of fabrics that go unused. So it has that consumer facing benefit where they have a really nice collection that's fashionable that they like, but it helps the factory not create additional waste. And it helps the business not spend large amounts of fabric that goes unused or gets recycled or out of season quickly.
Excellent.
And I think that for students, helping them understand more how factories work and the logistics between sourcing material and how sometimes the design complicates the back end of creating the product at large manufacturing or large scale, helping them understand how the design can add complexity helps them make better design decisions where the business benefits from it. A lot of the time, one specific color makes it very difficult for fabrics or for factories to source and do a lot of color matching, because the same color on a fabric is very different on a hard goods or a plastic. And colors that look great indoors look different outdoors. So the factories struggle a lot of the times with sourcing your material and do the right color matching.
Excellent, excellent. Next question, I'm curious as to both of your opinions as to what sort of resources that you use to help connect students outside of the classroom to more information on education around the circular economy. Kiersten, if you want to start on that.
Sure. My favorite source, the most complete one I think that there is right now, is through VentureWell. And VentureWell is an organization that's set up to help entrepreneurs in in colleges to develop new and invent new things. They have a whole section in their online resource guides that's all entirely about sustainability. Circular economy is highlighted, measuring sustainability with different types of life cycle assessment methods, greener materials as opposed to green materials, and being able to look at all of those resources in one area. I really like how they've collected it. I really like how they've given examples. They're examples that I use in my classes. And I also like directing students to their resources so they also get other resources about developing their own ventures.
Leo, your thoughts? Any particular resources you use?
Not specific resources, but just more hands-on, or try to point out locations where they can do hands-on projects or hands-on learning. And a lot of thrift stores, they're all around, and sending them to thrift stores to have them see what materials available, or even sometimes antiques or shops that repurpose products. That's usually the best location. When it comes to electronics, it's recycling centers. When it comes to like automotive parts, there's a lot of the U-Pull locations that will let you go in there and just take things apart and see how things are made. So I try to just point out locations around town that will let you come in, use their products, buy them at a reasonable cost, or even help them take products apart for recycling. It really teaches them to look at the process and what they make from a hands-on approach. So I first start with, if it's for fabrics or apparel, to look at thrift shops. If it's for electronics, to look at recycling centers. If it's for automotive or large-scale projects, I send them to Habitat for Humanity, where parts for homes are being dismantled and then recycled, or after natural disasters or storms, how some parts are still in good condition. It's just not good for an entire home. And for automotive, there's a lot of U-Pull locations where cars just get sent, and there's a lot of good products in there. But because now the car is no longer running, it's out of use. So sending them to those specific locations around town helps them open their eyes to what's available, and locations that will allow them to come in and learn without charging them a cost.
How can the circular economy design be integrated into higher ed curriculum? Kiersten, you do it already, but maybe you can kind of give some broad thoughts from what your career background in terms of what you've seen in other institutions in terms of integrating this into your curriculum.
I think that integration is the key term in that it needs to be part of the whole curriculum and not just the class in circular economy or the class in sustainability. If you have it as a part of multiple classes and you point that out, that we are doing X because this is a part of green design, sustainable design, circular economy, and to look at it that way and keep pulling that out, it becomes the norm as opposed to a specialty area. Another thing that I think is helpful for students to hear is that it's a way to be hired. One of the ways that students are offered hired for first jobs is because they have technological skills that are needed in the company. Different types of computer skills, social media skills these days. But another thing is knowing how to do circular economy research and application that other folks might not have learned how to do, probably didn't learn how to do while they were in school, and being able to be confident in that as part of the conversation about any design, again, opposed to being the unusual thing, something that we think about at the end of a project. If it's something that a student knows that they can contribute and will be expected to contribute at the beginning of a project, and that's part of their value toward any company or organization that they're going to be working with, I think that's helpful for them to see it as a normative area.
Excellent, excellent. Leah, what about you? How can the circular economy design be integrated into higher ed in your opinion?
Yeah, in my opinion, I think it needs two components that it's missing. So right now, design and design thinking it's been a lot of it's a linear process, but it's still kind of like an isolated process. And if you start thinking of circular design or a circular economy, it needs the component of a business system and more understanding of the planet and ecology, just natural system. Well, you need to inspire students to look at natural living organisms and how symbiotic systems live together in nature. I think that will inspire them to develop an interest, but to start connecting the dots in a circular way. Because in my opinion, a circular design only works if it's adding value at every touch point. And right now, design is just taught in isolation at times in higher ed. And you can design something great that's very purposeful, but if there's no business model behind it, it doesn't have that drive to really push it forward to the market and be implemented at large scale. So I think teaching design or the business of design with an entrepreneurship mindset gives the design that power to then launch it into the real world or the market, and then have it live there and evolve. Also, developing more of an interest for students on ecology gives them a better connection to Earth and understanding nature and the importance of keeping integrated systems. So I think, in my opinion, a little bit of that can be integrated just early on as an introduction, that great design needs a business model behind it, and great design also needs more understanding of the natural world.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your thoughts today. We look forward to future conversations on this important topic. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Kate.
you so much. Thank you.
The past year has shown us that our networks are both much bigger and much smaller than ever. Companies are faced with struggles to gain access to new materials through traditional channels. Those that focus on finding new sources within their local and regional networks are proving resilient. It takes more than just seeking recycled materials to make an impact. For startups and innovators, it takes a deeper look past carbon goals, walking through all the avenues to reduce to make a measured impact. We need to work forward and backwards to eliminate waste, not only at the waste that a manufacturing process creates, but at how materials can be sourced. A focus on going beyond sustainability and gaining competency in the circular economy can be an advantage in job hunts, becoming a key player in decision-making. Don't forget to register for the pitch presentation by our student competitors, live on June 25th, starting at 9 a.m. Join us at 3 p.m. today for one final discussion on moving from sustainable strategy to transformation. The programming today would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsors. The Lemelson Foundation, Business Oregon, Stoll Reeves, Oregon Community Foundation, the Ford Family Foundation, Horan Media Tech Advisors, Portland State University, Wells Fargo,